Welcome to Playing Above the Line, where we interview entrepreneurs, business owners, and community activists to get their thoughts and perspectives on leadership. Playing Above the Line is sponsored by Aviso Group, a business consulting and accounting firm focused on preparing clients for the future through innovation and positive growth. Welcome to Playing Above the Line. I'm your host, Alan, and we're excited to have another great guest today, Josh Null, and he is an independent financial advisor with Gulf Coast Financial Advisors. So, Josh, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Alan.
So now I'm a little bit nervous because I know that you got your own podcast, and so I always feel like when I'm talking to another podcast guy that I've got to be on, especially on my game. And producer Carrie's looking at me thinking that's not possible, so why even try? But anyway, we'll see what happens.
Well, you're nervous. I'm nervous sitting on this side because I usually get to be the one that asks the questions.
I got it. I like it.
Now I got to answer them.
So let's just start with jumping in with leadership, which is the theme of Playing Above the Line. So when I say leader, what do you think, number one? And then what do you consider your leadership style to be?
Well, I think one of the funny things in my life is my definition of leadership's changed over the years. When I was younger, I really responded to kind of the fiery, tell you what to do, bossy, kind of domineering leadership style. And what I've realized over time, as my life has taken its paths and its twists and turns, is I really respond more to the collaborative type of leader, somebody that is willing to bring everybody into the fold, and also a leader that's willing to kind of overcome adversity. Because sometimes when you've got that domineering style, and especially if the leader tends to be pretty charismatic, they do a great job when things are going well, but they may not necessarily know how to respond when things don't go as planned, right? So for me, personally, I think that I really didn't ever consider myself a leader until basketball. I grew up pretty rural, and where I'm from, you either play basketball or baseball. That was only two choices. Well, I didn't have the patience for baseball, and I didn't have the height for basketball, but I tried anyway. And over the years, I became a decent player, and obviously with my height, I became the point guard. And that was the first time in my life where I realized, I've kind of become the leader of this team. And as a leader, as a point guard on a basketball team, really what you are is the distributor. It's your job to get everybody involved, find guys in their spots, set people up, and then occasionally you got to score too, especially if the team needs a bucket. And I think that was, it's funny, your youth, so many things become concrete that you don't realize over time. But that was really probably what led me down the leadership path that I do. Is I'm much more of a distributor, I'm much more of a connector than necessarily someone that just sits there and tells people what to do.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the boxes you checked, we asked a little pre-show questionnaire, your leadership style, what you kind of want to concentrate on, and one of the things that you said was team over self, which just plays into exactly what you just said. So talk a little bit about, but you also mentioned kind of adversity and working through that. So one of the things that you said is that a specific aspect of your leadership or personal achievement that you want to focus on, and it was the ability to rebuild your life after a devastating financial loss in 2008 and the will to change. So, I think that those of us old enough to remember know what happened in 2008, mm-hmm. but expand on that a little bit and tell us exactly what you're talking about and then kind of how you pulled yourself up out of that situation.
Well, I'll try to make a long story short.
Well, that's fine. That's fine.
As short as I can. So I came out of Southeast Missouri, where I was born and raised, and I went to college in what is now called Missouri State, and went there. Had a scholarship, met a beautiful girl that became my wife, Jennifer, and really had just nothing but ups during that time. It was just a really blessed time in my life. I came out of college. We moved back to Kansas City, where she's from, and we both took corporate jobs for a couple of years. But we come from entrepreneurial families, and we realized that working in a cube, nothing wrong with it, but it really wasn't for us. So we both started our own businesses in our mid-20s. Well, this would have been late 90s, early 2000s. I got into real estate, and my wife got into, she opened a fitness center. Her fitness center did well, and then if anybody was in real estate during that time period, what kind of happened. At the time, honestly, I thought it was just because I was so smart that this thing was going so well, right? I thought I had this thing kind of figured out. And we went on, 7, 8, 9-year run there where it was just explosive growth. During that time, really up until that point in my life, Alan, I'd never known failure. I'd had my setbacks. You don't come out of the backwoods Ozarks without overcoming some adversity,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
But I'd never really been rocked on my heels by anything in my life. Had a great family, lots of love and support. My mom, my dad, my grandmas, my grandpas. We were all close. My family was close. as time went on, when you're in that market, and you're seeing some of those signs now, you kind of get to a point where you think maybe you can't fail, right? Mm-hmm. And so probably around 2005, 2006, I took what was a pretty profitable, pretty contained business, and I kind of pushed all the chips into the middle of the table. And I became the developer, the builder, and the realtor, 40-lot neighborhood. You'll laugh at this, but we opened it up in the spring of 2008. Now, we'd already started seeing some bad signs in 7, but again, we thought, hey, we're unique enough, and I'm smart enough, and I'll figure this out. And spring of 08, actually, things looked okay, but over that spring and summer and fall, things just started falling apart, and they fell apart rapidly. I mean, really rapidly. And so, again, to make a long story short, basically by the end of 2008, early 2009, I was busted. I mean, completely busted. And it was during that time period, I'm not only am I having to deal with the financial loss and the devastation, but I'm having to deal with the personal effect it has on you. I mean, you just feel like, how is this happening? What is going on? And of all the things I did there, I'm not trying to tell you that it was something I'd ever want to go through again in my life, but I learned something about myself. I learned that I had the ability to put one foot in front of the other, even when things were their darkest. And I also learned that I had a family that would never abandon me, ever, including my wife. And so what emerged from all that, and it took years to get over it, both financially and personally, but really what emerged from that was found respect for someone that has gone through financial devastation, health devastation, family devastation, all those things. It changed me forever. I always tell everybody it was the greatest thing ever happened to me, it was the worst thing ever happened to me, all in one, right? But what it did is it taught me that I can fail. And if I do, I've got to pick myself back up and I got to keep moving forward. And that's what we tried to do. Hadn't been pretty, but we've always managed to put one foot in front of the other.
I mean, we've all heard similar stories. I mean,
right. Especially people in real estate.
Real estate, yeah. But I mean, and people who have had business failures and whatnot. And so there seems to be two camps. I mean, really, you have the person over here like yourself who picked themselves up and was able to rebound and learn and grow from it. And you have people who just allow it to define their lives from then on, and they absolutely never recover. And it leads to just all kind of personal problems. I mean, you hear about people losing their families. I mean, just all kind of stuff. So, what do you think? I mean, what sets one apart from the other?
It's easy. That's a great question. The number one thing that when someone goes through that, and especially if they were kind of the center pivot point of all that, is you've got to be able to forgive yourself. And it took me years to do that. It was something where I had to go down with the ship. When all this went down, you had, you said two camps earlier. Well, some of the guys were probably a little smarter than me, and they had some of that stuff disconnected from them, so they were able to kind of walk away and move on with their lives. I'm not telling you that I did this out of any great sense of honor or anything like that, but I felt like when this all went down, I had to be the one that suffered the most. And then what I didn't realize was, as the years went on, that not only had I suffered the most, financially, but I'd suffered the most internally. And it was probably 6-7 years ago, I had a conversation with my wife, and I don't want to get too far deep into the religion side, but I told her, I said, I got to let myself down off this cross. I've been hanging on this sucker for years, for all the people, all the mistakes I made, the money, the emotion, the toll it took on all our family. I got to forgive myself, because if I don't forgive myself, I'm never going to be able to move forward. And that was a real turning point. I'm not going to tell you that, the next day everything was just hunky-dory and, people started throwing their money at me for investments or things like that. But it absolutely changed how I moved forward with my life, my interactions with people, the depth of the relationships that I have. Anybody that you all get a chance to talk to that is kind of in my network, I think they'll tell you that I try to give a lot of myself. And the only way you're going to be able to do that and overcome that is if you can forgive yourself, because the two camps you were referring to earlier, I have family members in my family that have gone through things like that, never recovered. But I've also had, as a great role model, my dad, who has been through a lot, but always gets up and goes at it, right? And my mom too.
Forgiveness that's a great point. And in your case, you had to forgive yourself. But there are also instances where you're wronged, right, through no fault of your own. You have to forgive the other person, right? So forgiveness is a very, very powerful thing, and I do subscribe to that theory. Let me ask you this, kind of along those same lines. So you were able to kind of, quote, forgive yourself, as you said, but did it take you a while to be able to trust yourself?
Yes.
Again?
Absolutely.
Because I mean, your chosen vocation now is financial investment advisor and that kind of thing. And so, obviously, if you went back, hindsight's 2020, you wouldn't make the same decisions back in early 2000s as you did. But now does it? So I would imagine it kind of makes you maybe sometimes second guess maybe what you're telling your clients now to do. I don't know. I mean, is that true? Or
I think that's a fair question, but a better way to look at it is that time period in my life set the foundation.
Okay.
For everything that we've built on the financial advising planning side. And here's what I mean by that. There are, and I have friends there, and some of them where they come out of college and they basically jump on the train and they do nothing but grow and shoot straight up. And you look at their bios and, they married their college sweetheart, jumped into this job at a wirehouse or a brokerage, went independent, and everything's worked out great. I look back at my life and I think if I had opportunities to get into this business when I came out of college. I have an economics degree. But I look back now and I think, my gosh, if I had done that then with how I was wired, not only would I have lost my money, I would have lost a lot of my clients' money.
Yeah, right.
So what it's done is it's set the foundation with a couple things with our practice. You asked the question, do I second guess the investments and choices, all that? No, absolutely not, because we build intentionality into our planning and our investment side where we are setting our clients up to hopefully grow, but we also protect their downside because it can happen. And so when someone comes to me and really is in our process, they know that I'm going to treat their money as their own. They know that I know what it's like to lose money, big money, and I know the effect that would have on their family. So they know that we're going to be overly careful and overly pragmatic when the choices we make. You never can guarantee that you're going to set someone up for total success, right? But what you can do is you can, the old saying, keep them from taking the elevator down, having to walk the stairs back up, right? And I think without going through that time period in my life, I would never had that view because all I'd ever known was things going up.
Fair enough. And I think that's a great point. And it's amazing what adversity will teach you that success, doesn't always teach. So
if you'll listen.
Yeah, that's right. Well, that's the point. I mean, we talked, the last episode I mentioned a consultant that we work with uses the term fail forward, which is, I think it's appropriate because if you fail, then that's, it's sad and it's not good, but it only if you don't learn anything from it.
Right.
So talk a little bit about obviously your outlook on life and that kind of thing, and your raising, as my granddaddy used to say, has had a big impact on you. So talk a little bit about your mom and dad, because on a personal level, you said that those are two folks that you really admire. What have they taught you about life and just things that you've been able to accomplish and the adversity you've been able to overcome up until this point?
Not necessarily, I'm going to get into mom and dad, but I think one of the things I learned coming where I'm from with, not only just how I was raised, the background, the history of my ancestors, if you will, I like to call it irrational optimism. So okay. I have irrational optimism that things are going to work out. And what as time has gone on, what I realized is that optimism sometimes is just created from the fact of getting up and just going at it. Don't let it stop you, right? And so as that relates to my mom and dad, you all don't know me that well yet, and I'm not saying that we grew up like total hillbillies, but we were close, right? We were some Ozark, I was on a show one time, and he asked me what was my first job. Did I bag groceries or work at a fast food joint? I said I'd had driven 30 miles to do either one of those things.
Okay.
Yeah, my first job was with a shovel and a ditch. And running tractors and dozers and stuff. And what I learned over the years, especially from my dad. My dad is from Wappapella, Missouri, is one of the most reliable and dedicated people to helping others move forward in what they're trying to do. My dad was a teacher and had great patience. How he dealt with me through junior high and high school, I'll never know. I mean, I look at how I handle my kids, and I don't have a fraction of his patience. Mm-hmm. But he always, he set the bar for someone that was going to do the job, do it right, however long it took. Didn't matter. He was going to, and still does, is always going to stay that way. My mom is similar to that. She actually was a teacher, or is a teacher now, and she taught for many years. She went through a pretty scary health scare. I guess it'd been about 15 years ago now, where they at one time thought she had cancer, right? And as it boiled down, to some things, it still ended up being a pretty serious diagnosis. She had a choice. She would have been in her late 40s, early 50s at that point. She had a choice, like you were saying earlier, where she could have felt sorry for herself. She could have retreated from life. And what she did instead was she attacked it. And she started, my mom was always a runner. She's the reason that I was a runner. She started running again. And at first she was running 5Ks and miles and just horribly winded because the condition she had affected her lungs specifically. As time has gone on now, I'll fast forward a little bit. My mom is now 66 and she runs marathons. And she has a huge following of people that have been inspired by her journey, right? And she gets other people to come in and run. I mean, she's really changed a lot of lives from the fact that she decided to attack what was against her versus retreating from it. And I'll never forget that.
That's amazing. And one of the things that you kind of mentioned in here is motivation in ways that you like to motivate your team. And obviously you got a big part of that from your, I mean, she's a prime example of that, right? So,
absolutely. But
talk a little bit about the importance of motivation, especially when you're trying to inspire a team to pull in the same direction.
Well, the thing is, when things are going well, motivation is easy. When you're going out there and you're talented enough or you're smart enough or your timing's right and everything starts clicking, it's great. It's easy, not easy, but it's easier to be the rah-rah person. Right. Let's get this thing going. To me, motivation is really more of when things go sideways, when literally sometimes when all hope is lost, what are the words that come out of your mouth? What are the things you do? What are your actions that will not only inspire yourself to take those things, but also will hopefully inspire other people to pick it up and keep going at it? Because at the end of the day, Alan, you tell me if you disagree, but there are people that go through life just, blessed, right? I mean, just, everything goes right. But then there's the 99% of the rest of us, right? And we've all had to overcome something. We've all, a buddy of mine used to tell me, he'd say, if you walked up to any person on earth right now and said, I know what you're going through and I'm here for you, there's not a person on earth that would say, what are you talking about? And I always remembered that.
I've got a friend of mine that I just call him the jelly side up guy. No matter when he drops a sandwich, it always lands jelly side up.
That's right. I got a couple of those.
He's the 1% out there maybe, but even him, and I give him a hard time because he's been successful, but it just hasn't happened, right? It's got to do with these things that you've been talking about, having a great attitude, being able to work through adversity and that kind of thing. So,
well, and I think knowing who you are as a person, I am a grinder. Yeah. I would love to tell you that all these things that we've done over the years has been a product of just being, really talented, like some of the technical, logical leaders you see. I'd love to tell you that it was because of the network or the family, background or things like that. But really what it comes down to is I come from a family of grinders. My wife comes from a family of grinders, and we're grinders. And I mean that in the best sense of the word. Yeah. We are process driven. We are going to keep coming at it because we want, I think we all have long views on our lives. When it's our time, we want to look back and say, man, we gave everything we had. Yeah. We never stepped back from whatever we were facing at that time.
And I appreciate that. And I agree with you that is an admirable quality to have. However, I got to think at some point, some days, do you not get up and just say, God almighty, I mean, I just can't do this today. I mean, how do you work through that is my question. I mean, I get the concept of being a grinder, and I think that there are absolutely people out there who do it better than others, and there's some who don't.
Right.
So what sets those people apart?
Well, to be fair, especially when you are trying to do, I always joke, I'm came down here to build a business that no one's ever heard of in an area I'm not from.
Yeah, right.
So there's going to be tough. Yeah. In fact, I was told I was a little nuts there in the beginning, but to be honest with you, I view it kind of like I used to box a little years ago, and I'm not trying to say I did very well, but you get knocked down, and when you get knocked down, you get rocked. There are some times where you can pop right back up, and there are some times where you got to take a minute. I mean, you got to get your bearings back around you. There's absolutely been times over the last several years we've been down here where I've been rocked. I mean, we thought something was going to work out or something was going to happen, the opposite happened. And what sometimes during that time period, and you're talking about being a grinder, a lot of it may be a Wednesday morning. I may get up at 6 and I may just have to sit there, literally not just physically on my knees, but also mentally and emotionally on my knees and gather myself. And the one thing that I think I'm, so far been able to prove is I've always been able to stand up. Mm-hmm. But yes, there are times where the reason you grind is for the success that you sometimes get. I joke with Kerry about this last night or this morning on email. We're long-term Kansas City fans, right?
That's right.
Yeah. And Kansas City could have given up on the Chiefs years ago. Mm-hmm. but they kept at it. They got some of the greatest fans in the world, and we kept grinding, and then all of a sudden we get the missing element. We get the right coach, we get the right quarterback, and it all comes together, and now we're Super Bowl champs. And so Jen and I and my family, yes, we've grinded, but we've also had enough success over that time period. We're like, okay, this is worth the journey. This is worth the pain.
Well, I mean, it's that stick-to-itiveness,
That's it.
that you got to have. And some people have it, and some people honestly don't. So, so what about that? Do you think that's something that people can learn, or is it just something that people innately have in them to be able to be that grinder and get after it and that kind of thing? Is it something you learn?
Well, I think it's a great question. I'll give you a 2-part answer to a 1-part question. I tease my wife a lot. I always tell her we were destined for each other because she's Irish, very Irish.
Okay.
Her ancestors came over and hopped from the cities, New York, Chicago, St. Louis, Kansas City, right? My family is more Scots-Irish, Scotland, and we came over and jumped right over the cities and headed for the hills. But the one thing that both of our families and our heritage have in common is the fact that we always kept moving forward. We always kept exploring new horizons. We always kept at it. So I think that there's absolutely a somewhat of a genetic disposition that, are you someone that never gives up, right? Now, on the flip side of that, that's wonderful and that's great. And some people, a lot of times, maybe not even know their heritage. Maybe it plays a part, maybe it doesn't. But I think that you can learn it. I think one of the ways that you learn it the fastest is connect with people that have overcome those things, that are leaders in the community, that are business owners, entrepreneurs, that have overcome health events. Get around those people. And as you know, I've sat here and detailed some of my issues like it was some great, cosmic event, right? But all you got to do is take a trip to a hospital, an orphanage, anything like that, and you'll see people that really face things. And then to me, that just hones in on, if you look at it as not what I have been not given in life versus look at what I have been given and the blessings and the opportunities, then I think you will learn to stick to it. I think you absolutely can learn it. I've learned it.
Yeah, that's great. I tell you what, I could sit here and talk for another hour. But I do want to ask one thing. So you mentioned things that you can learn from other people. I know your mom and dad obviously had a huge impact, but any other mentors in your life that you can?
So I'm somebody that seeks out mentors. I feel like one of the things that I'm been blessed with is I'm good at connecting with people, and I'm good at connecting people, period. And so I've always been someone that's always seeked out a mentor. Now, it's funny, you'll be in these different organizations and work for different companies, and a lot of times the most charismatic leader, the most vocal, maybe even, a lot of times maybe the owner of the company, the first wave of mentorship that they will give really hits home. But a lot of times it's the guy, the unsung hero, or the woman, the unsung hero, that has something a little bit more measured to say, that as you go through on with life, that starts popping in your head. Like, I remember what that guy said. And so I've been tremendously blessed with mentors, and I think part of that is the fact that I've sought them out. I worked for a company. I was on the road for 5 years. Had an incredibly charismatic owner. I mean, a guy could own any room he walked into. But one of the co-owners was much more kind of not quiet, but just a little bit more methodical. He wasn't a guy that would come in and just blow the room up like the owner would. His name's Eric Lucy. I'll name drop there. I still think about, I haven't been there in years, and I woke up this morning and thought about something he told me, right? No one cares how much you know until they know how much you care. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's like a huge driving point in my practice on something that a guy took 2 minutes to pull me to the side and say, listen, that's great you got up there and dazzled them all them numbers, but they don't care. They only care if you care about them, right? So, mentorship on that, I've got great mentors now. I always seek them out. I mean, gosh, we could make an hour-long show of who I consider a mentor.
I think that's great, and I think that everyone should, and whether it's formal or not, I mean, everyone needs that person or those people in their lives that they can learn from. And I don't care who you are, how old you are, you can learn something from somebody.
If you're a naturally curious person and if you view yourself as always a work in progress, right, then I think that you're naturally going to seek out people that have expertise in areas that you don't. And if you will just listen, a lot of times, you will gain so much more than if you just try to figure it out yourself.
Agreed. Talk a little bit about Gulf Coast Financial Advisor, and what's your vision for that organization as you move down the road? So
Gulf Coast Financial Advisors is a fee-only independent financial advisory practice. Now, I don't know if that to listeners that is just a bunch of gobbledygook or not, mm-hmm. But basically, we operate on the retirement planning side, the financial planning side, as a fee for service. So, that could be charging for assets under management, that could be charging for planning, that could be charging by the hour, that could be charging a one-time fee, whatever it is. The point of that is it's a very transparent way of investing and planning for your money. There's no hidden fees. Where every penny goes when you're putting your money into the thing. The goal of that, it's been an evolutionary process, because in my line of work, typically the guys that or women that end up going independent either come up from the wirehouse brokerage side, like at Ed Jones or Merrill or something like that, or they come up from the insurance side, usually a lot of times with the mutuals. Well, I came up from the insurance side, right? So I had to learn that side of it after I'd already learned all the insurance side. So our goal with Gulf Coast Financial Advisors was, on the retirement planning side, on the investment side, how do we be the most transparent we can possibly be? There's a big word that's in the lexicon right now called fiduciary. And fiduciary in and of itself is just a word, but what it means is you operate in the client's best interest. Well, how do you do that? Well, number one is you let them know what the heck you're charging. And that can sometimes be difficult, especially when you have various complicated products. So the Gulf Coast Financial Advisors was set up to plan your upside, protect your downside. Very specific on that. We're going to set this up where you're going to grow methodically. You're going to know what you're paying. What you're going to pay is going to be incredibly reasonable. And then also we're going to set in mechanisms where if things don't go right, we've got to answer there too, right? Long term, what we'd like to do, right now we have an office in Fairhope. That's where it originated. We technically have an office in Mobile. I'll be honest with you, I've been there about 3 times in the last month.
Yeah.
But the long-term goal, I named it Gulf Coast Financial Advisors for a reason. I didn't name it Josh Null Financial Planner. Right. What we'd like to do over the next 5 years is grow along the Gulf Coast.
Okay.
Bring on advisors that have the heart of a teacher, that are open and honest, and have them go into the communities where it makes sense to have a financial advisor. My brain can handle New Orleans to Panama City. We'll see how that goes. But I think along the Gulf Coast, I think the name makes sense, and I think our mission makes sense. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to grow there.
Very good. That's exciting. And so, Josh, I know that not only are you a investment advisor, but you're also somewhat of a podcaster. You have your own podcast.
I do.
So, which I can appreciate, by the way. This is a lot of fun, and I know why you do it. So talk a little bit about that. What's it called, and where can folks find you?
So the podcast is called Every Dollar Counts with Josh and Jay, and we're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and then we made intentionally, we support it with websites, social media, YouTube. We try to put it everywhere. We're trying to catch as many ears and eyeballs as we can where people are looking, right? Because not everybody is a podcast listener, right? Not everybody's on social media, that kind of thing. So, but Every Dollar Counts with Josh and Jay is basically where my co-host Jay Stubbs, he is a regional director for First Protective here in Mobile. We take insurance topics, we take investment topics, we take lifestyle topics of people that are serious about their investments, and we break them down in an open and honest way. There's no sales pitch to it. There's no agenda to it. We'll take things like long-term care, or we'll take 401ks and things like that, and we'll break it down to where it's in pieces that people can pick up and understand, and also in a manner where even if there's something in there that the industry doesn't necessarily want you to bring to light, we're going to bring it to light. Yeah, you remember I'm from the show me state, right? So you're born with a healthy dose of skepticism. Right. And I came into this industry already as a fully grown man. Yeah. I mean, I was in my mid-30s. So I'd had guys like me come after me with the golden ticket type of investment type of thing. Our practice is geared to be 100% the opposite direction. So we really focus on process and explaining all those things. And it's been great so far. We got a little bit of buzz going.
Very good. That's what you want. So as we wrap up, I know you got 3 children, Peyton, Ashton, and Josephine.
That's right.
So what is the one thing when they look back on their life with you that you hope that they will have learned from you as they ultimately get out from under your wing and go out into life?
So what I learned from my dad and what I'd hoped to teach my children was great patience. What I have done is the exact opposite.
Understood. I can identify with that.
Yeah, I joke, like if you ever saw me out with one of my children, you'd say that's a great dad. If you saw me with 2 of my children, you'd say that's an adequate dad. If you saw me with all 3 of them, you'd say this guy has no clue what he is doing.
I understand.
So, but I think on the flip side of that, and this is a lesson that my wife and I learned, especially from her side of the family, is we are very vocal. We don't swallow our problems. We don't hide our problems. We discuss them. And as time has gone on, I will go to my dying grave with this. I know can't tell you what kind of relationship I'll have with my children as they grow into adults and they marry and they do their thing. I don't know if I'll be their best friend like my dad is my best friend, right? But I do know one thing. They will know that I loved them. They will know that I was mad at them. They will know that I'm proud of them. They will know that I was disappointed in them. They will know all these things because we share it all. They will know exactly where they always stood with me and my wife, always. And I think there's some comfort to that. You have friends where like, man, my dad never showed any affection, right? Or to the other side where maybe dad was too much of a friend, right? Or mom and dad. With ours, I think, and I'm not saying we've got this figured out perfectly, but I do know that right now, if you asked them, where do you stand with your mom and dad? They'll be able to give you an answer. I think they'll be able to give you an answer 20 years from now, 50 years from now, long after I'm gone. They know where they stand with us. I think it's important.
Outstanding. And I will say that not only in raising children, but life in general, that's a great philosophy to have. We'll link your personal and your business information in the show notes for this episode. But if people want to learn more about Gulf Coast Financial Advisors, they can go to gulfcoastfa.com and check you out there. Josh, Null, thank you so much. This has been great.
Oh, thank you for having me. Appreciate it very much.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode, and if you did, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe on iTunes and Spotify. It definitely helps us in the ratings, and it also makes it easier for other folks to find the podcast. As always, a big thanks to producer Carrie Wolf and editor Johnny Gwynn. Playing Above the Line is sponsored by Aviso Group. If you want to know more about who we are and what we do, you can visit our website at avisogroup.com. That's AVIZO group.com. You can also check us out on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Thanks for listening.